We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
You are listening to The Underground Marketing Conspiracy, a secret ritual where entrepreneurs acquire highly classified and confidential business knowledge that the top 1% of income earners don't want you to know. And now, your host, Maddie Milligan.
What is up, my fellow conspirator and conspirators? Welcome to The Underground Marketing Conspiracy. Woo! Today I want to talk to you about offering your audience a new opportunity. One of the most common mistakes I've seen has been marketing where they're trying to sell something that's going to repair someone or something, that's going to improve what they already have. It's like a better version of something that they already have. It's going to try and step in and basically just be a band-aid solution, a quick fix to the problem that person is having. And your best option is to instead offer people a new opportunity, right? Something different. And sure, people might say one thing that they want to be fixed or they want something repaired. It's like, oh, if this would be perfect if it had this one little thing fixed. And sure, they might say that, but from my experience, a lot of the time when you offer someone a new opportunity, they're like, yes, like that's what I want. I want the better version of this. Like I don't want the same thing that I have because it has so many flaws. Like give me the different version. Perfect example is Steve Jobs. When he introduced the iPod, he could have easily been in and been like, hey, you know what? Like we have some CDs that they hold a lot more music now, or hey, we have this vinyl and it holds more music, or these cassette decks, right? And that was kind of the evolution where it went from vinyl to cassette decks to CDs, and those things are still pretty popular, especially vinyl because those are cool, but like CDs and cassettes, like you don't really see that stuff anymore just because it's basically become antiquated, right? It's something that people don't really use as much as they used to. So when Steve Jobs came in and he's like, hey, what if you could just walk around with everything, your entire music library right in your pocket? And it's like, oh, that would be awesome. And he just pulled out the iPad out of his pocket, or the iPod out of his pocket, and just talked about that. And that was a huge moment, right? Like that's whenever everything shifted. And even Steve Jobs himself talked about how focus groups are not necessarily the best place to get a lot of feedback. I remember growing up, I would go to some feedback groups, and people would give answers that they thought the person who was asking the questions, doing that market research, wanted to give them, right? I remember doing this for a bunch of TV shows, and there was one where it was like a comedy, and I was just so honest through the whole thing. I'm like, no, this wasn't funny. Okay, that joke was good. That wasn't funny. Okay, this joke was all right. Like, that wasn't funny. That wasn't funny. That wasn't funny. But there were people like, yes, it's amazing. It's so great. And I could tell looking in their eyes that they didn't believe that, right? They were just too afraid to probably offend that person or whoever was looking behind that two-way mirror. They were basically just giving that answer, right? This is why I think things like the Ask campaign, for example, can be flawed, because it's like, hey, let me know about this. Like, what's your number one problem in this area? And people might give you some information, but, you know, they might say they want thing, but then they won't actually, when it comes to buying, take out their credit card and buy from you, or give you that cash, or whatever it is, make that transaction to buy a thing from you, right? But I think the new opportunity is something that you need to be offering people, right? Like, don't offer them a better version of something they have. Offer them a new opportunity. If you want more on this, there's a couple books I would recommend. There's a whole section where Russell Brunson goes off in this in Expert Secrets specifically. So I'd recommend checking that out as well. But one of the reasons I also wanted to cover this is because, again, I saw that Cybertruck launch recently, which I've talked about, right, from Elon Musk and how he launched that and how they made so much with zero ad spend. And they just spent all that money on the event itself. But his is an example, right? But going further back into the evolution of cars, one of Henry Ford's most famous quotes was, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And then sure enough, he brings in the Model T, and you know, it's a better version, right? It's a new opportunity for people like, oh, I don't have to like maintain these horses. I can just drive this car, fill it with gas, and get where I want, right? And then Elon Musk, obviously with Tesla, what he did was, I talk about him way too much, by the way. My apologies. I'll try and cover some other more famous entrepreneurs. But again, he's a good example to use in this case. With the Tesla, it came in, it's like, hey, you no longer need to use gasoline. You can just charge your car And arguably with these electric cars, you could say that it actually takes more energy than it would for a regular car, but that's a whole other story. But he came in with his electric car and was like, hey, you know what? Like, here's the chance. You can just plug it in. You don't need to go to gas stations anymore, fill up on expensive gas. You don't need to do there. You can just do it from your own home, right? And a lot of people are like, whoa, like, I'm down, right? And even with this new Cybertruck thing, apparently it's has a solar panel and charges itself so when you're on the go, which is pretty cool. So that's a new opportunity for people, right? Coming up with those new things when it's a new thing. And again, you have to acknowledge what they've tried before. It's like, hey, you've probably tried these other things in the past, right? Like, you've tried these things, and really showing people how old school and outdated and antiquated those, whether it's strategies or products or services they're using, showing them how out of date they are, right? And really giving them that new opportunity to come into the future, use something that's new, that's something that's modern, that's up to date, that's going to work for them from this point forward to the future. That should be your objective, right? And I think people will always buy from certain people that help them. There's this other book that I wanted to mention called The One Sentence Persuasion by Blair Warren. And he basically has 27 words that make the world do your bidding. And I'll just give you a quick quote from the book, which is really all you really need to know, which is, people will do anything for those who encourage their dreams, justify their failures, allay their fears, confirm their suspicions, and help them throw rocks at their enemies. So when you come up with your new opportunity, make sure you're covering each of those things, right? Making sure, again, that you're being positive and being like, hey, you can do this, right? I know you want this thing. And again, encouraging their dreams, doing that. Then I would justify their failures, right? I just talked about that. Showing them what they've tried in the past, and basically, showing them what they have and be like, hey, you know what? It wasn't your fault that you failed because of XYZ reason, right? Because of the person you learned from, or the strategy, or it wasn't the right time, or whatever it was. Maybe you didn't have the right resources. Really giving them that. Then allay their fears, which is essentially from there, it's like, hey, I know you're scared about this. Like, it's normal to be scared. I was scared going through the same thing. Confirming their suspicions. And again, having that, this comes down to knowing your customer, knowing the stuff that they've tried, going into that conversation in their head. And it's like, hey, maybe you've been suspicious of doing this thing, and maybe you knew that it wasn't going to work. And you know what? Like, you're absolutely right. So confirming that with them, helping them throw rocks at their enemies. I think this is a really big part. So in this case, it's like, this is where the polarity is really going to help you, when it's like, all right, I know you believe this, and there's probably these other people out there, or these other businesses that you don't like, right? Maybe it's XYZ person or XYZ business. And again, it's not their fault, right? Like, those people, they're trying to, maybe in some cases you could be like, hey, they're trying to help you, but you know what? They're just giving you the false information, or, maybe they're just trying to, I don't usually like to say that other people are trying to scam you or be fraudulent or spam you or whatever, but I mean, depending on what market you're in, that might be useful, right? But again, having each of these elements is really going to help people believe you. And then when you stack that on top of something new, a new opportunity, that's really what's going to get them, right? And I talk a lot about the big marketing idea, which again is like the crux that holds your whole campaign together. And the new opportunity needs to tie into that, right? Each of those things that I just gave you, I mean, you don't have to have that necessarily in the headline or the lead, but I think making sure that when you reread your copy, like, I recommend after you've written everything and you have the final draft, like, reading it out loud to a group of people. This is why, like, copywriting is good to do alone, but having other people there, and even if it's on a Zoom or a Skype call where you can group chat and just talk together and really just share stuff, like, at the end, once it's written, saying it out loud and asking the people if, again, you hit all those points that I talked about, right? And making sure, again, being like, okay, do you see the new opportunity? Is there anything you haven't heard about before? They'll be like, no, like, that's awesome. And then from there, again, it's going through each of those things that Blair Warren talks about, right? Making sure that you're encouraging their dreams, justifying their failures, etc. Making sure that at some point in your sales message that you do cover each one of those little things, right? And that's just going to make your campaign a lot more successful. It's going to make whatever you're selling just a lot easier, right? Because again, people don't want to just buy like a better version of something, right? It's like if their car breaks, it's like, oh, you could buy, another part of the car, right? It's like, oh, my muffler's done, get another muffler. It's like, oh, okay, cool. It's like, oh, now your brakes are done, cool. And at some point they'll get frustrated. They'll be like, oh man, this car, like, it's just absolutely annoying. It's like, hey, you know what? I have this newer car and it has, better stuff, right? Or even then, I mean, it could be like a self-driving car, right? Like that's the new opportunity for people, right? Really, this is where your imagination and creativity does need to come into play when you're coming up with your offer and coming up with your product ideas. But having all of that stuff in place, that's really the best strategy to make your campaigns more successful. So again, stop trying to sell people on these improvement offers. Stop trying to help them fix things. Stop telling them to repair themselves. There's really nothing to fix. It's like, look, like you've just been told the incorrect things. There's a new thing that's happening. It's revolutionary. Hop on the new bandwagon and hop on my new opportunity. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, I want you to consider subscribing, maybe even consider going back and listening to a few episodes or sharing this with someone that you might feel would get some value from this. My name is Matty Milligan, and I will see you next time on another episode of The Underground Marketing Conspiracy. Woo!